Well, hello there everyone. If you've been on the internet recently, there's a decent chance you've seen some footage of the game MOTORSLICE, a new parkour game in a post-apocalyptic wasteland with killer machines, and your only way to take them out is your handy-dandy chainsaw. It's very much a parkour-heavy platformer, and it's a game I thoroughly enjoyed, and I want to start off with a first for the channel, but thank you to the devs for sending me a download code. I had seen bits and pieces of this game and thought it looked cool, but the day it came out, I got an email that said, "Hello, here's a download code for the game." So, thank you, that's very nice of you. Anyways, the game is essentially a sort of fusion between Prince of Persia and Shadow of the Colossus, and the levels in this game are a lot of fun, but we've also got 8 bosses, which are almost like more extreme platforming segments or giant puzzles, and I felt like ranking them from worst to best. That being said, I couldn't find any official names for the bosses anywhere, just Chapter 1 boss, Chapter 2 boss, etc. So I'm going to be making them up as I go, and I'm going to freely admit I was not the best at this game, but it was a fun time, all in all, so let's get started, shall we? Number 8, Bossaran. Chapter 6 pits you against a giant piece of farming equipment, and it is an irritating boss on a good day. A big gimmick with the boss is you have to use the wind turbines to fly up and get on top of the boss. This works okay enough, and most of his fight isn't too bad. But it's definitely good to remember that you can effectively stay in place while sawing a boss by holding down the left trigger. I really wish I realized this was a viable strategy before I was in the middle of the final boss fight, but oh well, it's not the first time that I learned an important game mechanic in the middle of the final boss fight. Seriously, I don't know how I managed to beat Xenoblade 1 on the Wii without realizing you could command your party member's AI, but somehow I did. Anyways, the fight isn't too bad getting those early hits in against the boss. Heck, even getting the one up in his front isn't that difficult. However, he also has a weak point on his underside that you can't really saw into because it's a vertical surface that's above you. So how exactly are we supposed to do this? Well, you know why I called the boss Bossaran? Because you have to use the turbines to flip him over and leave him vulnerable. Except 1 or 2 turbines won't do it. I spent 15 minutes trying to lure him around the arena and into the turbines until enough of them were able to blow him over. But he just decides when he wants to randomly turn on a dime and when he has a turning radius the size of Alaska, so he'll get lifted off, but he just won't flip. It's beyond irritating, and even when I realized I needed a straightaway of about 4 fans to flip him, it was a pain in the ass to line it up. And I'm going to get this out of the way right now. I don't like the boss theme in this game. I liked it fairly well for the first 5 or so bosses, but by this point, having only 1 boss track, and it being a fairly repetitive track at that, I wasn't a fan. It's not helped by the fact I'm not really into breakcore as it is. Even the other bosses in this game that gave me trouble though were still pretty cool once I learned how to execute the fight. But if I battle this guy again, I'm certain it's going to waste another 20 minutes of my life trying to make the damn thing flip again. Cap it off with it. Well, I'm not a huge fan of Chapter 6 as it is, and this is easily the low point of the game for me. Number 7, Apache Attack Helicopter. Chapter 2's boss, on the other hand, was just plain underwhelming. An attack helicopter that fires buzzsaws at you should be awesome, but it's kinda lame and less involved than even Chapter 1's boss. At first, he fires buzzsaws at you and you need to parry them back at him, which is quite cool, and honestly, you might even be able to one-cycle the boss here and take it out here and now. However, if you don't one-cycle him for some reason, then it really doesn't matter because all the boss will do now is slowly fly around the arena with plenty of ways to mount him and deal the finishing blow. And he doesn't fire his buzzsaws anymore either. It's not a broken or downright infuriating boss like Chapter 6's boss, but the entire fight feels kinda toothless, or like everything was defanged sometime in production. Number 6, Rail Crane. Chapter 4's boss is one I'm iffy on because now that I understand how it works, I think it's fairly cool, but I don't think the mechanic is the most intuitive. Now, climbing up the crane arms and taking out the mechanisms is all fun and good, but there's another thing we need to keep in mind, and that's the front and back of the vehicle that also have spots that must be sawed through, and while you can gently jump off the side, that's not the ideal method, though that is the one I employed on my first run of the game. There are the yellow rods which you can grab onto, but they're not going to get you up high enough to actually reach the top of the vehicle. But there's something about this fight that works well once you understand it, but it's not intuitive at all, at least to me, and that's the wheels on the side of the vehicle are counted as a wall you can jump on, and you can scale up and jump off of to get higher up and get onto the back of the crane. Maybe this is a me thing, but that did not come across as obvious in any way whatsoever to me, because while they're moving the wheels on the vehicle, well, keep in mind, it's not likely, but they can still crush you. And sure, they're flat, but I figured that was just an art style thing, not an actual, hey, this is a wall you can jump off of. And once you're on the, crane, there's not much else fight to it. It just slows down its movement considerably to, I don't know. Overall, it's fine. I think the fight works well. However, the aha moment was less of a aha moment and more me wondering if I had somehow triggered a glitch with how everything worked. It's not a bad boss. There is some pretty fun stuff here once you know what to do, but prior to that, I don't know, it's just kind of bizarre. Number 5, Earth Mover. The first boss of the game, and the one that has to set the tone for the rest of it, and that tone is goofy as hell, but also kind of awesome. Unlike most of the bosses, you can actually parry it running you over, which is really cool, though sadly it sets a precedent that didn't really come up with any of the other boss fights. At least, not that I know of. If you can parry the other bosses in the game outside of their buzzsaws, please let me know. Otherwise, outside of trying to run you over, the Earth Mover offers very little in the way of opposition, but instead focuses on a simple and tight level design, giving you a chance to get used to the game's controls and figure out how you're going to do damage to a boss as you progress, and it functions in a way similar to Valis, which was the first boss of Shadow of the Colossus, just with far more checkpoints thrown in because you die in a single hit in this game. Which, okay, fair balance. Most of the challenge in this fight is simply getting used to the controls and having to navigate a giant moving structure, with the only real opposition after the start being the part where he tries to raise up the bed to send you flying off the back to die from gravity. It's a straightforward fight, but it does a great job setting the player up for what's to come and giving them a comprehensible setting to work in, while the game's story is more or less just a matter of go up. It's kind of like Celeste, but I actually like this game. No shade towards Celeste fans, it's just not a game for me. Number 4, Gigas. Chapter 7 has probably the largest opponent in the game. This is also probably the hardest platforming challenge in the game, with multiple points you need to make quick turns with your chainsaw. At least it was the toughest boss for me, and you know what? That's good for one of the game's very last opponents. The one issue I have with this fight is there's a weird glitch I found where if you die after you begin climbing the Gigas but before you reach your first checkpoint on his body, well, I found that P stops being able to wall run out of her MOTORSLICE, and I'd have to exit to the main menu to fix this issue because that's kind of mandatory to get past the initial run-up. But putting that aside, it is a fun challenge and a very demanding, ordeal. It demands a level of precision that even the final boss doesn't really hold, but it's also the longest battle in the game by quite a bit, because even when you know what to do, this boss still has 11 segments of health you need to slice through, while most opponents, even the final boss, cap out at 6 segments of health. This boss is going to demand more from the player, and one misstep often leads to death, but checkpoints are fairly generous, and after the first climb, it's not really that bad to just retry the segment, and the parkour is really fun. I especially like near the end of the fight when you have to swing across the entire machine, getting onto the saw, and that one final slash through basically the entire center part of the body. It's a big challenge against one of the largest video game bosses I've ever seen. Heck, this thing is larger than some whole galaxies in Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, but it's a very fun time and I enjoy it a lot. Number 3, Rifleman. Chapter 3 has far and away the most boss fight looking boss fight of the lot, and his design especially fits that, with the large dish on his head reminding me of the Rifleman from MechWarrior. Anyways, this is probably the most no-nonsense fight of the game. You immediately see him and know what you need to do. Find a way to get on his feet before you can scale the Colossus, then make your way through his joints while carving his body up along the way. It's one of the easier bosses in the game, fitting of its fairly early placement, but it's also just plain fun, and there's not a whole lot of what the fuck do I do outside of the final blow being to carve out his face, so you have to drop down the holes in the top of his helmet, and then take a death-defying jump to, well, go for the final blow. It's tense, but it's cinematic, and it's a ton of fun. Plus, it gets points for being one of the few bosses to actively attack you with a proper weapon instead of just running into you, as it has a giant drill that isn't just for show, it's also there to pierce right through your ass because this boss is secretly a Gurren Lagann reference. I made that last part up, but one of you believe me for a second. Number 2. Skyrail. The final boss of the game isn't some big grand finale for the player to overcome, but instead it's yet another elder to bring down, at least narratively and in terms of music. But in terms of cinematics, it might be the high point of the game, as the Skyrail throws logic out the window and any sort of real-world application out the window as well. Instead, it's just a giant flying train. I really wish we had unique music for this final battle, because hearing the same song yet again was admittedly a bummer, but it's still a fun final boss. Otherwise, though, it's one final test, and the fight is really cool, albeit not exactly much of a fight. What we need to do is line up an approach to board the train, but unlike the Apache attack helicopter, you control the pacing of it because you have the ability to call the Skyrail down, and then you can board it from the front. Once you're taken into the sky, you now have to platform along the top of the train while avoiding the buzzsaws, but thankfully there is a checkpoint so you don't have to board the train again if you die. But it's effectively phase 2 of the fight, just without doing any actual damage to the boss. So yeah, it's pretty fun, albeit pretty simple. Then phase 3 sees the train flying over the top of the entire map as you simply make your way through the mechanical monstrosity's interior, chopping it to pieces, and it's a pretty satisfying final parkour test, because outside of 2 saw blades at the end, there's not much of a threat from the train, it's just your platforming capabilities, which does lead to a gripe I have with this fight, and that's that if you fall, well, because it's flying all around the map and above the early game layers, it means you're going to be falling for a very long time before you actually go splat and respawn, but that's mostly just a nitpick, not a real issue with the boss. The battle isn't that long when you know what to do, but it combines a fair number of gimmicks from previous levels and bosses into one last parkour test, and overall I'd say it's a lot of fun. In fact, one of the only things that doesn't return is parrying saw blades, and to be honest, I'm kind of glad I'm not getting shot at in this phase because that would be a bit of a mess. Overall, it's a very fun final boss fight and a great way to cap off the game since Chapter 9 isn't a real chapter, it's more of a 5-minute walking simulator with credits playing over the gameplay. Number 1. Goliath Excavator. There are some pretty good fights, but Chapter 5 has my favorite boss by far, because while I accept and I'm okay with the sort of game having angry level geometry making up the lion's share of its boss battles instead of trying to ham-fist in some really crappy melee combat mechanics, I like this battle the most since it feels the most boss-like of the bunch. It's actively attacking you throughout the fight, the cutscene has a little bit more to it than just, here's the boss, get ready to fight it. And it's just more open-ended of a battle than most other opponents. You can choose the order you want to tackle its weak points, either going for the treads, the joints, or climbing the arms. And while the large foe is surprisingly fast, you're able to stun him by parrying the saw blades back into him, but you do need to be careful because he's firing off 3 and you can only really parry 1 at a time. But what we're really going to need to truly damage this boss and get in some real damage is something bigger to stun him, like giant pillars. Oh wait, that's in this very arena, so you're using the environment to interact with the boss while having a nice little bit of parkour thrown in, and it's not requiring trial and error memorization or superhuman reaction speed to pull off the tougher parts of the fight. It's a more challenging and active opponent than most bosses in the game, but it's also the one that feels most satisfying to me, and the one I found replaying quite a few times just for fun, even after I got the footage. Overall, it's an excellent boss fight, and it does its inspiration to both Shadow of the Colossus and Prince of Persia very proud. I like this fight a lot. So that's about it for this video. MOTORSLICE was a lot of fun, and while it's not my main sort of go-to game, I won't lie and say I wasn't interested when I saw the clip of P parrying the giant truck hundreds of times her size. So once again, massive thanks to the devs for the download code. Anyways, that's all I've got for this video. If you liked it and want to see more content of varying quality, consider liking and subscribing, hyping the video, and I'll see you all next time. Until then, take care everyone.